I am Biba Chauhan and welcome to Jai Hind Classes Funda Clear. So today I will explain chapter 3 from Indian Polity book written by M. Lakshmikant, and chapter is Salient Features of the Constitution. So you know that the Indian Constitution is unique in both of its content and spirit, and in this chapter we will discuss about its salient features of the Indian Constitution. Though borrowed from the almost every constitution of the world, there are many salient features of the Indian Constitution that distinguish it from the constitution of other countries, and in this chapter we will discuss about them. So, as adopted in 1949, there have been gone so many amendments in the Indian Constitution, particularly 7th Amendment, 42nd, 44th, 73rd, 101st, 97th. There have been so many amendments, and latest amendment was 104th Amendment, that was on 25th February 2020. So there have been so many amendments, and the 42nd Amendment is known as the mini parliament due to its various changes, because after the 42nd Amendment there have been so many changes in parts of the Indian Constitution. So it is called as the mini parliament. And even in the Keshav Nand Bharti case, the Supreme Court declared that the parliament, under the constant power of the parliament under Article 368, doesn't enable it to alter the basic structure of the constitution. That was in the Keshav Nand Bharti case. And first topic is salient features of the constitution. So first we will discuss about the salient features of the constitution, and in this our first subtopic is land-based written constitution. So constitution can be classified into two types. First is written constitution like American Constitution, and second is unwritten like the British Constitution. So Indian Constitution is a written and is the landiest of all the written constitutions in the world, and it is the landiest written constitution of the world, you can say. And there are many factors because of its landiest. It is landiest. There are many factors behind it, and it was adopted in 1949. When it was adopted originally in 1949, there were 395 articles, a preamble and 8 schedules. Until 2019, it has become 470 articles, a preamble and 12 schedules. So you can see that in the time period there have been so many changes. About 20 articles were deleted, and one part was also deleted, and about 95 articles were added to the Indian Constitution, and 4 schedules, that were 9, 10, 11 and 12. So there have been so many amendments, you can say, and in the time period the articles were also increased. No other constitution in the world has so many articles and so many schedules like Indians. You know that in the American Constitution there are only 7 articles, and in the Australian Constitution there are only 128 articles, and in China Constitution of China, there are 138 articles, and in the Constitution of the Canada there are 147 articles. So you can see that in India the number of articles, so many, there are so many number of articles in the Indian Constitution. And there are factors behind the landiest. It is landiest because of factors. First factor is geographical factor, that is the vastness of our India. You know that India is the 7th largest country of the world, and there is so many diversity in India. So this is the first reason why there have been so many, you can say, the Indian Constitution is so landy. And second reason is historical factors. Historical factors like the influence. For example, the influence of Government of India Act of 1935. Because of history, there have been so many influence on our Indian Constitution. And third factor you can say is that in India there is only one constitution for both center and state, whereas in America there are 2 constitutions, you can say, one for center and one for state. So you say that In India, there is one constitution, so that is the reason why it is lengthy. And fourth reason is that it is a dominance of luminaries. There have been dominance of luminaries in the constitution. So that are some factors behind the lengthy constitution of the India. The Indian constitution doesn't only provide the governance, it also provides the administrative things, that is the administrative provisions also. It is also provided by the Indian constitution. So you can say that the first salient feature of our Indian constitution is that it is the lengthiest of all the written constitutions in the world. So second is drawn from various sources. So the Indian constitution is drawn from various sources. The second salient feature of the Indian constitution is that it is drawn from various sources, and from the constitution of many countries, and even from the Government of India Act of 1935. The structural part of the Indian constitution is large extent to the Government of India Act of 1935. The philosophical part, that is the fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy, is derived from American constitution and the Irish constitution, you can say. And the political part, political provisions of our Indian constitution, that is the relation between legislature and executives, cabinet, government, parliament, that is derived from the constitution of British, that is the Britain government, Britain constitution, you can say. And other provisions of the constitution of India are derived from the constitutions of Canada, Australia, USSR, that means Russia, its before earlier name was USSR, and Japan, and so on. There have been so many countries from the constitution of whose the provisions of the Indian constitutions are derived. And you can say that the Government of India Act of 1935 has so much influence on our Indian constitution. You can say that the features like the federal features, government, parliament, that are derived from the Government of India Act of 1935. You can say that more than half of the provisions of the Indian constitution are identical or bear a close resemblance to the Act of 1935. So you can say that Government of India Act of 1935 has so much influence on our Indian constitution. And you can say that Indian constitution is drawn from various sources. So our third is blend of rigidity and flexibility. So constitutions can be classified into two types, that are rigid constitution and flexible constitution. Rigid constitution are those constitutions which need special procedure for amendments. For example of rigid constitution can be American constitution, whereas in flexible constitution doesn't need any special procedure. It will make amendments as ordinary laws. And examples of flexible constitution can be British constitution. So the Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible, but is a synthesis of both. Article 368 provides some provisions for amendments in India. That are, first is that some provisions can be amended by a majority of Parliament House, that is a two-third majority, two-third of the Parliament assemblies present and voting. And second is that some provisions can be amended by the majority by the voting in the Parliament and with the ratification with half of the states. That is the second provision provided by Article 368. And however, there is other thing, that is some provisions can be amended by the Parliament majority, you can say voting, and there would not be any special procedure with it will be amended as legislative process, and this provision doesn't come under Article 368. So you can say that in India there is rigid constitution as well as flexible. Our Indian constitution is synthesis of both rigid and flexible constitution, you can say. So next is federal system with unitary bias. So federal system with unitary bias, that is the next feature, salient feature of our Indian constitution. You know that Indian constitution is federalism, federal in form, that is it contains federalism, features of federal constitution that are division of powers, written constitution, supremacy of constitution. You can say there have been so many, you can say there have been so many features of federal, independent judiciary, you can say integrated judiciary, that are the features of federalism in India, and that is why it is called as federalism, federal constitution. Whereas in India, however, there are some provisions that are unitary, that are based on unitary system, and there also can be called non-federal features, that are supremacy of our center, you can say all India services, appointment of governors by central government. So you can say that there have been so many features that are based on non-federalism, and thus the Indian constitution is called as federal in form and unitary spirit, that is quasi-federal by Casey, whereas Granville Austin said our Indian constitution as cooperative federalism constitution. And there have been so many comments on this, like Mora Jones said that commitment that Indian constitution is bargaining federalism constitution, and Sir Ivo Jennings said that Indian constitution is flexible with central tendency, and so on. There have been so many comments by the political scientists, you can say that. So you can say that Indian constitution is federal and as well as unitary, and even it is said that Indian constitution is federal, but whereas in the constitution the word federalist is nowhere to be seen, and on the other hand Article 1 provides the word union of states, that implies two things. First is that Indian federalism is not based on the agreements of the state, and second is that no state can secede from the federalism. So you can say that Indian constitution is federalism with unitary bias, you can say that. So next is parliamentary form of government. So Indian constitution has opted for the parliamentary form of government, that is in the British, rather than the American presidential form of government. The parliamentary form of government implies that there would be relation between executive legislature, there will be cooperation, coordinates between legislatures and executives, whereas in the presidential form of government, that is in America, it is based on the doctrine of separation of the powers of both. So Indian constitution has adopted the parliamentary system of government, and the parliamentary system of government doesn't imply only on center but in states as well. And the features of the parliamentary form of government in India are that presence of nominal and executives, you can say that. Second is that head would be Prime Minister of center and Chief Minister of states, you can say. There have been so many, that is collective of legislatures over executives, you can say. There have been so many features of the parliamentary form of government that are, and the parliamentary form of government is in both countries, in India and in Britain, but there have been differences between the both of the parliamentary system. That is that the Indian parliament is not a sovereign body, whereas the Britain parliament is a sovereign body. And second is that Indian parliament contains an elected head, that is of republic, but whereas in parliament, in British parliament, it is hereditary head, that is on monarchy, that is based on monarchy. So you can say that there have been so many differences between the Indian parliamentary form of government and British parliamentary form of government. But one thing is similar in all the parliamentary form of government, that is the role of Prime Minister is so crucial, that is he is so crucial and he is so important, his value, his role is so important in the parliamentary form of government, and that's why some political scientists call the parliamentary form of government as prime ministerial form of the government. And you have to notice that The parliamentary form of government is known as the Westminster model of government, cabinet government, you can say responsible government. Westminster is a place where British Parliament is located. So that is why it is called as the Westminster form of government, model of government, you can say. So next is synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. So sovereignty of parliamentary is adopted by the British Parliament, British Constitution, you can say, whereas judicial supremacy is adopted by the American, from the American Constitution, you can say. So there is a synthesis between both, synthesis between parliamentary sovereignty and the judicial supremacy. Just like the Indian parliamentary form of government differs, there are differences between the parliamentary form of government of India and the British parliamentary form of government. Just like that, the judicial supremacy also differs. The Indian judicial supremacy also differs from the judicial supremacy of the American judicial supremacy, you can say. It is narrower than that of what exists in US, you can say, and this is because in America there is due process of law against that procedure established by law that exists in India. So you can say that there is difference between judicial supremacy of India and America, and you can say that there is synthesis between both, between parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. You can say that on the first hand, you can say on one hand, the Supreme Court, from its power derived from Constitution that is made by Constitution, you can say, can declare any laws unconstitutional that are enforced by Parliament, that are passed by Parliament. The Supreme Court can declare them unconstitutional, and on the other hand, the Parliament from its constituent power can also amend a major portion of the Constitution. It can amend because it has constituent power. So you can say that there is synthesis between both, between parliamentary sovereignty and between the judicial supremacy. So next is integrated and independent judiciary. Integrated and independent judiciary. You can say that in India there is integrated judicial system. On the high, the Supreme Court stands. On the highest level, the Supreme Court stands, and below it there are some high courts, you can say, some high courts of each state, you can say, and below high courts there are so many subordinate courts, or you can say district courts, or any other courts, and any other lower courts, you can say. So you can say that there is integrated judicial system in India, that is, first on the highest level there is Supreme Court, and below it there is high courts, and below it the lowest is, you can say, district courts, or you can say any lower courts, you can say. So you can say that in India there is integrated judicial system other than what exists in America, you can say US, because in India the Supreme Court can enforce both laws that are passed by center and as well as the state. This judicial system, the integrated judicial system of India can pass both center levels, you can say, center laws, and as well as the state laws that are enforced by state laws, you can say state. But in America it is opposite. The federal laws are enforced, you can say, are implemented by federal courts, whereas the state laws are enforced by state courts, you can say. So that is their judicial system, American judicial system, and you can say that in India there is integrated judicial system other than what exists in US. And so the Supreme Court is highest court, you can say highest court of appeal, guarantor of the fundamental rights of citizens, guardian of the Constitution. So the Constitution of India has also given so much power to it so much independence to it. That is why Indian judicial system is independent. There is independence of judicial system of India. The constitution has provided that is security of tenure of judges. You can see the funds that are the expenses of Supreme Court on the consolidated fund of India. You can say prohibition on the matter of judges. You can say punishment for retirement. That means if you're practicing after retirement, that will be punishment. There will be punishment for you. So you can say, so there have been made so many provisions by the Constitution of India to make an independent judiciary in India. You can say there have been that is ban on the matters of judicial system in legislature, and the most important is that separation of judicial system from executive and so on. There have been so many provisions to make an independent and integrated judicial system in India. You can say. So next is fundamental rights. Fundamental rights. So part 3 of our Indian Constitution consists 6 fundamental rights that are: first is right to equality that are under Articles 14 to 18. Second is right to freedom that are under Articles 19 to 22. Third is right against exploitation that are under 23 to 24, that are under Articles 23 to 24. And fourth fundamental right is right to freedom of religion, and that comes under Articles 25 to 28. Next is fifth fundamental right is education and cultural right, you can say, and it comes under Articles 29 to 31. And sixth and last fundamental right is constitutional remedies, you can say, constitutional remedies, rights against constitutional remedies, and it comes under Article 31, you can say, and it comes under Article 32, you can say. So these are 6 fundamental rights that are given by the Constitution of India, you can say, and that comes under part 3 of our Indian Constitution. So the fundamental rights are based on political democracy, you can say, based on democratic country, based on democracy of India to protect people, and Supreme Court is guarantor of the fundamental rights of citizens of India. If any citizen's fundamental right is violated, then he or she can appeal to the Supreme Court. The aggrieved person can appeal to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court can give writs to the issues like warrants. The Supreme Court can give warrants, prohibitions, many things it can to save the protection, to protect the fundamental rights of citizens of India. But however, there have been so many situations in which the fundamental rights are violated, they are not sacrosanct, you can say, they are not sacrosanct or anything. In the case of national emergency, you can say, national emergency, the fundamental rights are restricted, you can say, and other than those which come under Article 21 and 22, you can say. And in case of any violation, it cannot be changed by any particular amendment by Supreme Court, you can say. So this is all about the fundamental rights, a salient feature of our Constitution, of our Indian Constitution, you can say. So the next is directive principles of state policy. Directive principles of state policy. According to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of drafting committee, he said that the directive principles of state policy are the novel features of our Indian Constitution, you can say. He said that it is a novel. The directive principles of state policy are novel features of our Indian Constitution, and they are made to seek the political democracy for a welfare of state. Directive principles of state policy are made for the welfare of state, you can say, but however they are non-justiciable and non-enforceable by courts if there is a violation of them, unlike the fundamental rights, you can say, because fundamental rights are justiciable in the nature, but whereas directive principle of state policy are non-justiciable in nature and non-enforceable by courts if there is a violation. But however, the Constitution of India says that directive principles state policy are very important, and it shall be the duty of state to make balance, you can say make balance between fundamental rights and directive principles state policy, and it shall be the duty of the state to provide to contain some of the principles of directive, you can say, of state policy, to enforce laws, to make laws, you can say. So you can say that the Constitution of India says in the favor of directive principle state policy, and in Minerva Mills case, the Supreme Court held that the Indian Constitution is bedrock of fundamental rights, on the basis of fundamental rights and the directive principle of state policy. You can say there is synthesis between both. So you can say that directive principles of state policy is important for a democratic country. You can say it that like that. So next is fundamental duties. Fundamental duties. So there are fundamental duties just like the fundamental rights for citizens. So there are some fundamental duties for citizens as well. So originally when the Constitution was adopted, there were no fundamental duties, you can say. But after the time when there was an internal emergency in 1975, you know, so when there was internal emergency, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act under the recommendation of Swaran Singh Committee provided for fundamental duties of citizens of India in the Indian Constitution and in the 86th Constitutional Amendment. After the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002, there was added one more fundamental duty. So now present there are totally 11 fundamental duties for citizens of India. They are to protect, to respect the national flag, constitution, national anthem of India, to promote the spirit of brotherhood amongst the citizens, amongst all people of India. Third is that to respect, to protect, to save our national heritage of India, of our culture, you can say, and so on. There have been totally 11 fundamental duties, you can say, and these fundamental duties are reminder for the citizens of India, you can say, because they enjoy their rights, so they have some duties for their culture, for their tradition, for their society, for their country as well, because you know that they are enjoying. If the citizens are enjoying the fundamental rights, then they have some fundamental duties as well, you can say. So you can say that these fundamental duties are also not justiciable in nature, you can say. So next salient features of our Indian Constitution is a secular state. So Indian Constitution is adopted as a secular, you can say, India is a secular country, that is no religion is adopted as official religion of India, you can say, and that is called as secular, you can say. Indian Constitution is known as secular constitution, you can say, and there are some features which determine that Indian Constitution is secular, and those are: first is that the term secular was added to preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. Second is that preamble provides to all citizens of India liberty of faith, belief, worship, and etc., you can say. Third is that the government of India shall not deny any person on equality of laws and equality of protection, you can say, before law, equality before law and equality of protection if their fundamental rights are violated. Third is that the state shall not discriminate any citizen of India on the ground of religion. And fourth is that all the employments for government office workers, you can say, for government services are opened to all the citizens of India. It doesn't matter what their religion is, you can say. Fourth is that no particular religion, no particular restrictions, you can say instructions of particular religion should be given in any government schools, you can say in any school, you can say. And next is that next feature that determines the secularism, you can say, of India is that the citizens of India are free to propagate, to profess, to practice any religion of their choice. This is their choice. This is their fundamental right, you can say, right to freedom of religion. And next feature is that all citizens of India are free to preserve their distinct languages, script, or you can say miniatures. They can preserve their traditional, their religious things, you can say. And next is that all citizens of India are allowed to administer, you can say administer or open their own religious school. They are allowed, they are free to do this. And so you can say that these are all the features of secularism of India, you can say that these features of India determine the secularism of India. And the Western concept of secularism, secular constitution differs different from what exists in India. That is, the Western constitution, the Western country's constitution adopts a negative sense of secularism, you can say. That means there is a separation between the religion and the state. That means the church and the politics. No religious groups are allowed to seek the matters of politics. Politicians, you can say, and politics matters. Politicians are also not allowed to seek any matters of religion. There is completely separation between the powers of both. Whereas in India, where India is multi-religious country, you can say, there are so many religions of India. So this negative type of secularism is unapplicable in India. So there is a positive sense, you can say, positive sense of secularism. That is, we have given all respects, equal respects to all religion. That means we have given all opportunities to all persons equally, whereas in Western there is no, they are taking responsibilities equally from all people, and here in India we are giving responsibilities to all people equally. So you can say that. And in India, secularism, you can say, there is secularism and all persons are given equal, you can say, equal respect by government. They can do whatever they want by their fundamental rights. So this is a concept of secular constitution. The Indian state is a secular state, you can say. So the next salient features of our constitution, of our Indian constitution, is universal adult franchisee. Universal adult franchisee, that is right to vote. Indian constitution provides every citizen who is above the age of 18 can vote to the members of legislative assembly, to the prime minister, anyone. He can elect, he can vote after the age if he is above the age of 18, and this age limit of 18 was reduced to 18 from 21 after the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act. So you can say that after this Amendment Act, after this Constitutional Amendment Act, the age limit was reduced to 18 from 21. So you can say that, and this is universal adult franchisee. You can say that right to vote. Every person in India, every citizen in India is allowed to vote the person he wants, irrespective of their caste, religion, sex, you can say age, you can say that, and so on. There is no, you can say, discrimination. And this concept of universal adult franchisee was started from the early stage, you can say that. The main feature of our Indian constitution is universal adult franchisee, you can say that. The constitution makers have seen our Indian country, you can say India, the vastness of India, diversity, you can see the illiteracy of people of India, high rate poverty in India. So that's why they made universal adult franchisee. This right of people, universal adult franchisee, will preserve the prestige, will preserve the pride of common people, of the weaker sections of people, you can say, in India. So this is why the universal adult franchisee was made. So next is single citizenship. Single citizenship. So in the Indian constitution there is a concept of single citizenship. That is the salient feature of our Indian constitution, you can say. Single citizenship means that there is only one citizenship, single citizenship for all citizens of India, in India, you can say. Whereas in America, you know that there is two citizenship. There is a concept of two citizenship, as there is a federalism, dual polity, that is center and state. So there is two citizenship, that is central, national, you can say, or state level. The citizen of America is alliance, is preserved to take two rights, you can say. One that is conferred by national central level, and second is that is conferred by state level. He is a citizen of US as well as the particular state where he belongs. So you can say that in America there is two citizens. There is a concept of two citizenship, whether in India there is concept of single citizenship. Although there is a concept of dual polity, that is center and states, there is only one citizenship, that is our Indian citizenship. If there is a person, he can decide, he can enjoy all his rights, all his national rights. All rights are conferred by central level of India, because you know that there are federal as well as unitary bias in India. So person of India has a single citizenship and can enjoy his rights in every part of India. He would not be discriminated on basis of citizenship. So this is the concept of single citizenship, salient feature of an Indian constitution, you can say. And even after the single citizenship that is given by our Indian constitution, the government of India has been facing so much communal riots. There have been linguistic distincts, you can say. There has been so many riots, you can say, struggles, you can say, movements, protest against this. So you can say that the concept of making united, integrated India by constitution makers, by making Indian citizenship has been fully avgot, you can say, has not been completely reached to India, you can say. So next is independent body. Independent bodies. So you know that there are three organs of our Indian constitution, that are executive, legislature and judiciary. But apart from these organs, there have been some independent bodies that are independent to do, and those are, first is Election Commission, you can say. Election Commission, independent body, and that are to ensure free elections, fair elections for the president's office, you can say, vice president's office, legislative assembly, you can say. Second is Comptroller and Auditor General of India, who controls the credit of India. He acts as the guarantor, you can say, of purse and credit of India, of whole India, you can say. Third is Union Public Service Commission, that is all India, you can say, central services. And in this commission, you can say, there have been exams like Indian Administrative Service, like Indian Forest Service, like Indian Police Service. So you can say that this is for the recruitment of people for central level. Fourth, you can say, fourth independent body is State Public Service Commission, and it is for the recruitment for people in the state level, that are made for state level. They would do examinations and would be recruited in the state level. So these are some of the independent bodies, and these independent bodies work, you can say, act so important in our government, you can say, in our administration of India. And so for this, our Indian constitution has provided so many things, you can say, so many, you can say, protection for these bodies, like security of tenure, like condition expenses, like the expenses by these will be consolidated, will be added to the consolidated fund of India, and you can say that all actions can do that. You can say that these independent bodies are independent of other bodies, you can say. So next salient feature of our Indian constitution is emergency provisions. Emergency provisions. So the Indian constitution, the constitution of India, provides an elaborate emergency provisions for President of India to seek the matters of India, you can say. So to seek the unique matters, you can say. And the rationality behind the emergency provisions are to safeguard the unity, integrity, security, you can say all these features of India. That is why emergency provisions are made. And there are basically three types of provisions for emergency. There are made three types of provisions for emergency in India. First is that national emergency, and national emergency comes when there is a war or armed rebellion, aggression of war, and it comes under Article 352. Second emergency is that can be on state emergency, and it comes on two factors. First is that when it is a failure of the constitutional machineries in the state. Whenever there is a failure of constitutional machineries in states, and there would be emergency, and it would come under Article 356. And second factor is that to comply with states. When there is a failure to comply with states, then also there would be an emergency, and it comes under Article 365. Third emergency can be financial emergency. Whenever there is a threat to the financial stability or credit of India, there is an emergency, and it comes under Article 360. So these are three emergency, you can say, made for, and the provisions are made for these three emergencies. And during the time of emergency, all the power goes to the central level, central government of India, and there is a break. There is a, you can say there would not be any federal system. There would be unitary in the time of emergency system, and all the power of state government would go to the central government without any amendment, you can say that. So this is a time that during the time of emergency, all the rights of people are preserved by the central government. All the power of state government goes to the occupied by the central government, and central government becomes the most powerful during the time of emergency. And you can say that to make federalism into unitary system without an amendment, that is the concept of emergency, and is a salient feature of our Indian constitution, you can say that. So next is three-tier government. Three-tier government. So you know that on the basis of our federal country, there are dual polity, that is central and state. There are two governments, central and state. But later in India, there have been amendments, 73rd Amendment and 74th Amendment of 1992, which have made local governments, the third tier of government, that is local government of India, you can say that. The 73rd Amendment, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992 made local governments, made third tier government for village, you can say Gram Panchayats. These are local governments of village, rural area, local, you can say. And the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act made municipalities in urban areas, or you can say municipalities as the local government of urban areas, you can also say that. And this Constitutional Amendment Act, this municipalities, this concept of municipalities comes under Part 9A and in the Schedule 12. And whereas the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, the Gram Panchayats comes under Part 9 and in the Schedule 11, you can say that. So this is a three-tier government. In India, there is a three-tier government, you can say that. Central, state and local. In rural areas, there are Gram Panchayats, and in urban areas, you can say municipalities. There are municipalities, you can say that. So the last salient feature of our Indian Constitution, you can say that, is cooperative societies. Cooperative societies, that is the last salient feature given in this book, in this chapter you can say that. Cooperative societies. So, the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011 made provisions on the protection of cooperative societies of India, you can say that, and it made mainly three changes that are: first is that it made right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right and it comes under Article 19. Second is that it included a new directive principles of state policy on the promotion of cooperative societies and it comes under Article 43B. And third and last feature you can say that is that it made cooperative society, it made a new part 9th B on the basis of cooperative societies and it is named as the cooperative societies. It made a new, you can say, part 9th B and its name is the cooperative societies and it comes under Article 243ZH to 243ZT, you can say that. So these are three features of that, these are three provisions made by 97th Amendment Act, and this new part, this new 9th B part made autonomous democratic cooperative societies, on the protection of cooperative societies these were made, you can say that. And the parliament, it enables parliament, the Parliament of India has made these provisions to respect cooperative societies and legislative assemblies, you can say, and to make appropriate laws, you can say that. So this is about the cooperative societies and these are all the salient features of our Indian Constitution. Now second topic is criticism of the Constitution. So the Indian Constitution as was adopted and was made by the Constituent Assembly has been criticized on many grounds. There are not only one ground, there have been so many grounds. On several bases the Indian Constitution has been criticized and we will discuss some of them. So first is a borrowed constitution. A borrowed constitution. So many of the critics opined that the Indian Constitution is mainly borrowed from the other constitution, from the other constitution of other countries. It is nothing new and nothing important. It is just a borrowed constitution. They have said it borrowed constitution or bag of borrowings or hodgepodge constitution or the patchwork of the documents of the world's constitution, of many countries' constitution. So critics have said that Indian Constitution is nothing new, nothing important and is just a borrowed documents, patchwork of borrowed documents. However, this criticism, this criticized statement is wrong because it is said that we have borrowed some of the features of the other constitution, but there have been modifications. The constituent members, the constitution makers have made modifications on the necessities of our India on those features that are borrowed from the other country's constitution, you can say that. So there have been so many modifications on the necessity of India. So how can it be borrowed? If we have borrowed, then we have added to it, we have made modifications in it, and on this criticized system Dr. B. R. Ambedkar himself answered this question that one has to be satisfied it. The first written constitution was made almost 100 years ago and there have been most of the constitutions, you can say that, are similar to each other in various ways. What we have to do is that we have to make modifications on the necessities of the countries. We have to make various changes in that, modifications, you can say that. So that was the answer of B. R. Ambedkar, and he said that he made no apologies because it is not a borrow, that is, modifications are also made, so how can it be borrowed? So next is carbon copy of 1935 Act. So the critics also opined that the Indian Constitution, the Constitution of India is just a copy, is mainly from the Government of India Act of 1935, and thus they called this Indian Constitution as a carbon copy of 1935 Act. They have criticized the Indian Constitution on basis of this, on the ground of this. For example, N. Srinivasan said that the Indian Constitution in both of its language and substance is mainly from the Government of India Act of 1935. And P.R. Deshmukh, who is a constant member, who was a member of Constant Assembly, also criticized Indian Constitution on this. That he said that Indian Constitution is just Government Act of 1935, Government of India Act of 1935, only added adult franchise. So he criticized on this comment. And Sir Ivor Jennings, who is a constitutionalist, you can say who is a constitution expert, also criticized the Indian Constitution on this. He said that Indian Constitution has made most of the provisions mainly from the Act of 1935. Most of the are from the Act of 1935, mainly directly textually, you can say that. So you can see that Indian Constitution has been criticized on basis that is a carbon copy of Act of 1935. However, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar answered this criticism, as he said that yes, we have borrowed, then what is wrong? I make no apologies, and he said that there is no need of apology because we have taken the good features of the Act of 1935. So what is wrong with this? He said that, and he said that we have taken good features, we have make modification changes on that, whether it is good. So next criticism was that un-Indian or anti-Indian. So un-Indian or anti-Indian. The critics have said that the Indian Constitution is un-Indian or anti-Indian. That is the opposite of India. Indian tradition, Indian culture, Indian spirit. They said that they criticized the Indian Constitution by saying that the Indian Constitution is against the Indian culture, tradition, spirit that has been preserved for many long years. And there have been so many comments on this as well. K. Hanuman Thaya, who was a member of the Constant Assembly, said that we wanted the music, the melody of veena or sitar, but here we have only the music of an England band. This is because the constitution makers were educated that way. So you know that he is saying that he wanted the music, melody of Indian tradition, culture, but here he has only the spirit, you can say, of the Western things, Westernization, you can say that. And there have been other commitments as well, like Loknath Mishra, who was a member of Constant Assembly as well. He said that the Indian Constitution is a slavish constitution to the West. He said that it is a slavish imitation of the West, much more as a slavish surrender to the West. He is saying that after borrowing so much things from the Western countries of the Constitution, we have surrendered to them as a slave. He is saying that. And next is that Lakshmi Narayan Sahu, who was also a member of the Constant Assembly, said that the Indian Constitution has no manifest relation to the Indian culture. He said that after it would not be worked, that is, Indian Constitution would not work on the citizens of the Constitution or on the citizen of India after being operated in India. He is saying that. Next is an un-Gandhian Constitution. So next criticism was based on an un-Gandhian Constitution. Many critics said that the Indian Constitution is un-Gandhian. That is, they are trying to say that it is opposite the views, the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi, you can say that, and that is why they called the Indian Constitution as an un-Gandhian Constitution. And K. Hanuman Thaya, the same member of the Constant Assembly, said that the Indian constitution is exactly what Mahatma Gandhi didn't want and had not envisaged. So he is trying to say that the Indian constitution is against opposite of the Mahatma Gandhi's thought, what he didn't want. And T. Prakasham, who was also a member of the Constituent Assembly, said that the reason why the Indian constitution is an un-Gandhian constitution is because Dr. B. Ambedkar had not participated in the movements, in anti-India movement with Gandhiji, and he is antagonism against Gandhiji. He has antagonism with the Gandhiji, you can say that. So you can say that critics have criticized Indian constitution on the basis of an un-Gandhian constitution. You can say that they criticize that Indian constitution is not based on the thoughts of Gandhiji. So next is elephantine size. Elephantine size. So critics said that critics have criticized the Indian constitution on the basis of its size, you can say that. They said that Indian constitution is indeed very large document, indeed very lengthy document, and it has some unnecessary elements in it. Sir Ivor Jennings, who was a British constitutionalist, you can say who was a British constitution expert, said that, commented on this, that the Indian constitution has adopted so many things, so many documents, and has not adopted so well. That means unnecessary things, and that is why the Indian constitution is too complicated and is very lengthy in size. And H.V. Kamath, who was a member of Constituent Assembly, also commented in that the Indian constitution is very lengthy, is too complicated, is indeed too long, you can say that. He commented on its elephantine size. He said that, he commented that Indian Constituent Assembly has adopted elephant as its symbol, but don't make the elephantine size, the size of constitution as of elephantine, like elephantine size. And they both said that, H.V. Kamath and Sir Ivor Jennings both said that the Indian constitution is of elephantine size, you can say that. So you can say that critics said that Indian constitution is too lengthy, too large document, and has some unnecessary elements, and is a size like an elephantine, you can say elephantine size. So next and last is paradise of lawyers. Paradise of lawyers. So critics said that the Indian constitution is too complicated, and Sir Ivor Jennings also said that it's a lawyer's paradise, you can say that. And H.K. Maheshwari, who was the member of the Constituent Assembly, also commented on that in this matter, that the Indian constitution is too complicated, too illegal, and it has made the citizens of people only to go to the law courts and have made no trust on truth or non-violence. It has made people violent, you can say, or you can say false, you can say misbeliefs in people. So you can say that critics have criticized on this that it is a lawyer's paradise. Lawyers of India has to do so much work because of this constitution. This Indian constitution is too complicated. The sentences, the phraseology, that means the phrases of the style of phrases written in constitution is indeed too complicated, you can say that. And there have been so many criticizings on our Indian constitution, you can say that, and there have been so many amendments as well. For example, P.R. Deshmukh, who was a member of the Constituent Assembly, the same P.R. Deshmukh said that the Indian constitution is indeed too complicated, is a lawyer's paradise, you can say that. All these have commented on the same thing, you can say. They said that this made lawyers too much burden to do work. The Indian constitution has made too much burden to the lawyers of India to do work. And P.R. Deshmukh also said that when the draft of Indian constitution was proposed in house by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he thought it as a ponderous terms of documents of law. It was just a ponderous terms of documents of law according to him. So you can say that there are salient features of the constitution we have discussed, and there have been so much criticism of our Indian constitution on the basis of several grounds. So this is all about the chapter. I have discussed all topics, subtopics. We have discussed all salient features of the constitution. We have discussed about different commandments of people on our Indian constitution, and so this is all about the chapter. This chapter is completed, and I'll be covering next chapters in further videos. So thank you very much.